Clematis are without doubt our most popular flowering climber, and it's not difficult to see why. There are dozens of species and hundreds of hybrids in all sorts of shapes and sizes and colours, and don't they look good? This one is particularly interesting because this was the very first cross that is still surviving. It's called Clematis eriostemon hendersonii, and it was first produced in 1820. But it came from two parents that came to this country in the 16th century. So we've been growing clematis here for quite some time. This is a straight species rather than a hybrid. It's Clematis tangutica, and I love it for these nodding yellow flowers which appear together with the fluffy white seed heads. Now this is scrambling up the wall, which is the conventional way that most of us grow it. But one of the great advantages with going to a garden which is open to the public is that you can see all sorts of other ideas that you can take away and use in your own garden. Here at Burford House in Shropshire, there are all sorts of imaginative ways for using clematis. But this garden was created by John Treasure, and nobody knows more about using clematis than he does.
I rather like growing clematis through trees, especially trees that don't flower. For example, this conifer. Here we have a Montana variety, and it's a vigorous plant.
Not many of us have room for a tree this big.
No, there are a lot of other trees that can be used, and there are a lot of other species that can be used. Smaller trees, and not so vigorous species.
It's just a case of choosing the right variety.
Yeah, I think so, yes. Yeah.
Clematis texensis, for example, is a native of Texas, and it's the only scarlet clematis in existence. This one is a hybrid of that called Sir Trevor Lawrence. And doesn't it look good growing through this Cotoneaster? Clematis viticella is another good variety like that, and this one is growing through a Philadelphus. Now, what you can do with both of these is to cut them hard back in November. You can pull all the rubbish out then so that it looks nice and neat, and it'll give the host plants a chance to thrive. But of course, as well as using them to add flowers to plants that aren't in flower, you can also plant a variety that flowers at the same time as the host plant so that the flowers complement each other. I think this Florida alba growing through the ceanothus looks perfect. The uses of clematis really are endless. Here's an ugly old stump, too big to dig out of the border. So instead it's been covered with wire netting, and you can see that this little clematis has already made a start on turning it into what will one day be a flowery feature. And how's this for another brilliant idea? Down this end, a standard bedding scheme using fuchsias. But up this end, clematis running along the ground in between the fuchsias to enhance the scheme. Now, of course, if you're going to do this, you've got to make sure that the clematis grow in the right place. So you do that with a series of wire pegs to just hold it in place, and then they'll grow exactly where you want them to. You can use much the same idea to grow clematis over low-growing evergreens. But of course, if the two plants are in flower together, once again, you've got to make sure that the colours blend. This Rouge Cardinal Clematis and the pink flowering heather are just another example of the John Treasure magic touch. But of course, when heathers go out of flower, they can look a bit drab. So who would believe that this is a heather bed? It looks marvellous, doesn't it? Because it's been brightened up for the late summer with Clematis. This one is Étoile Violette, and this is the aptly named Abundance. Now, both these are Viticella varieties, so both will be pruned down hard in November. All this top growth will be taken away, and from then on, the heathers will take over and they'll flower their hearts out. It's a perfect combination, and it certainly makes me see Clematis in an entirely different light. Well, as always, John, the garden looks marvellous.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I'm pleased we did this year, but you know, it's been a funny old season. Things have grown rapidly and, I don't know, it's been funny.
Well, you say that, but a lot of people have the experience of a bit of a lull at the end of the summer. You
Yes.
know, but you don't seem to have any problems here.
I've heard this. No, I don't think gardens should have a lull at this time of the year. But, you know, there's so many plants one can use. But above all, I think, you know, the Clematis really now come into their own again. And there are plenty of Clematis in this garden to satisfy most tastes, I reckon.
This lovely old rambler, Alberic barbier, produces a terrific flush of flowers early in the season, and with regular dead heading, a few more through the year too. To increase the flowering impact, I've grown a Clematis Étoile Violette through it. That gives me colour from July right through to late October. Of course, there are dozens of modern Clematis that suit the cottage garden very well, many of them with large flowers, and many, like the Star of India there, with a very long flowering period. But if you're going to grow Clematis through roses, you need something like the Viticellas or this one, Texensis Pagoda. The secret is to choose varieties that flower late in the year. And then, when they finish flowering, you can cut them right down to within about a foot of the ground and pull all the old Clematis stalks out of the rose, and that will give it a chance to ripen its buds, so it'll give you a really good show of flowers the following year, and of course the Clematis will come back too. At this time of the year, Clematis are looking a little bit sad in the garden centre, so you might be inclined just to pass them by. But if you take a close look, you'll see that there are some fat little buds all ready to grow away. So, in fact, now is a very good time to plant. I'm going to grow this Clematis Viticella variety through this little acer to give me some colour in the autumn. Now, do bear in mind that it'll be competing with the tree, so put the hole a little bit away from the tree. And I've also enriched the soil here with a bit of pelleted chicken manure because I'm organic, or if you're not, rose fertiliser will do. And I'm also going to put on a little bit of calcified seaweed because Clematis, of course, are lime lovers. Now, when you knock it out of its pot, you'll probably find, yes, that the roots are running round in a bit of a circle. Now, if you leave them like this, strangely, they make a habit of it and they never really get away. So the best thing to do is to just tease those roots out a bit, like that, so that they stop running round in a circle. And when you plant, notice that I've planted this very deeply, and there's a good reason for that. Clematis are subject to a disease called Clematis wilt, where the whole plant will wilt from the top. Now, it will only attack the shoots above the ground. So if you plant nice and deeply, there'll be plenty of shoots there, plenty of buds underneath, ready to grow away and give you some new shoots. So now we just cover that in and firm that down nice and firm as you go. Don't set it in concrete, but get it reasonably firm. Now, do bear in mind, all during next season and the one after that if necessary, that this little plant is in competition with this big tree. So don't, for heaven's sake, let it go dry. And then when you've finished filling it in, you simply cut it back. And now I'll just clean this up, and that's a good job done. Now don't ever, incidentally, be put off by the complicated pruning instructions for Clematis, because there is a very simple rule of thumb. If they flower before June, the middle of June, then just leave them alone at this time of the year. But if they flower after the middle of June, then you cut them right hard back, just like I've done here. Now, the large flowered Clematis are looking wonderful at this time of the year, and of course they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and colours. It's also an excellent time for taking cuttings if you want to increase your stock. And you can get several cuttings off one stem. So take a nice long stem like this. But of course, on a showery day, the place to prepare these is in the greenhouse. Now you make these cuttings in a slightly different way to most cuttings, and you can get quite a few out of the same stem. Now start at the top and trim just above a leaf joint there. You start at the top, and then instead of trimming just below the leaf joint, you go about halfway down between the two leaves, and then I would just take this half of the leaf off like that. There. Now that one is likely to be a little bit too soft. You do want soft material, but the one at the top might be just a little bit too soft. So I'm going to do one just below it as well. In fact, I should do several all the way down the stem, and they're all done in just the same way. I'll just trim that bit of leaf there, and that bit there. Right, now you need to protect them completely against fungus diseases. So the thing to do is to immerse the cutting into a solution of fungicide. Now almost any fungicide would do, but when you do it, do either wear rubber gloves or at least have a really good scrub up afterwards, certainly before you eat your sandwiches. And then the cutting goes into the compost. Now this compost consists of 50-50 coir compost and vermiculite. And use the horticulture vermiculite, not the stuff that they sell for insulation purposes, and put it in so that it's just level with the top of the compost. There, like that. Just tuck those in. And now you need to water those in. And to water them in, you use the fungicide again. And that will ensure that any fungus spores that have rested on the compost are completely deactivated. Right, now you need to keep those cuttings nice and humid, and the way to do that is to cover them up with a little bit of thin, clear polythene. And this is the bit that I normally mess up. I'm a bit ham-fisted, I must admit. Pray for me, won't you? You put an elastic band round the bottom like this. Now, a lot of people go to great lengths to put a stick in the middle there to keep the plastic off the leaves because they feel that it's going to scorch. Now, that is actually quite wrong, because what happens is that the moisture condenses on the top of the plastic and it can be quite dry around the cuttings, and that's not what you want at all. So let it rest just gently on the top of the leaves like that, and then put them in a shaded cold frame, and they should root in something like 6 to 8 weeks.
Valley Clematis have been showing at Chelsea for 4 years now and have some of my old favourites. Let me introduce you to a 19th century dame, the Duchess of Edinburgh. Isn't she quaint? I like the wonderful white sepal colour, and it's transitory as it gradually fades to green underneath as the flower ages. Fair Rosamond is white with the maroon centre. Here the sepals start with the pale green markings and then fade to white. And multi-blue is a surprise. It doesn't look much like a clematis at all, more like an artichoke or a cactus. And this small Texensis pagoda, look at these tiny white flowers with subtle mauve veins and recurved sepals. So delicate. Doesn't it make a change from those big dinner plate blooms? As for the new ones, here's lemon chiffon, with a hint of green in the centre carried all the way up the veins, which gives it a marvellous sharp colour. Anna Louise has a rich burgundy red with a texture so velvety you could almost use it as a soft furnishing.
Raymond Everson, you're one of the country's leading experts on clematis. Last time you were here, you recommended that I should put this clematis through this tree, and it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Jeff, I'd forgotten about this, but this Viticella et al. Violet looks particularly well here, and such a most suitable clematis for going through an amalancula like this. The amalancas, of course, look super, and a lot of the young sort of spring flowering trees look good, but then, of course, there's not much interest for the summer, so if you can get that added interest by putting a clematis, and in particular the Viticellas, through a tree like this, then you have that long period of summer flower as well, so it looks very good indeed.
Well, that's been flowering now, actually for months, you know, and there's still some more to come too.
That's right. The Viticellas, as I mentioned, really are most suitable because if you choose the wrong type of clematis, an early flowering one, that would be really wrong. So what you can do with the Viticellas, of course, is trim them right down to 12, 18 inches or so above ground level, even in late November. And then, of course, you haven't got the untidy foliage and dead leaves of the clematis during the winter. You've got the tree or the shrub in its natural form. And then, of course, the tree or shrub can then come into flower and foliage, or whichever is first. And then the clematis coming through the summer months. So you have this period of, 2 months or so of flower during the summer, particularly with the Viticellas.
So they're the ones to go for, and of course there's quite a range of colour too.
Oh, yes, of course. There are whites and pale mauves and reds, so a big selection of different cultivars. And it's just really a matter of choosing the most suitable one for the tree or that you're growing it through.
Well, it's a great idea for trees. Now, what about shrubs?
Clematis work particularly well through shrubs. I think I like to see clematis growing in a natural way through shrubs or other plants. They work especially well through ground cover plants, through flat spreading junipers, and of course over established heather beds as well.
Well, it'd be nice to brighten up this little area in the summer. What is that you're growing through there?
This is a Viticella purpurea plena elegans, which is a lovely old cultivar, a double one as you see. This is just coming out into flower, and you can see what a lovely combination of colours here this will be, even now, and next summer especially good. And of course next year too, through this golden colour, this erica as well here, and up this juniper, the grey foliage of this juniper will lend itself particularly well to this lovely old colour. So I'll go ahead and plant this, Jeff. And
well, the soil here, Raymond, is really very heavy, and I have actually, of course, prepared this area, but will they do okay in very heavy soil?
Yes, clematis don't really want very, very heavy soil. As you say here, a little bit heavy, and that's a stone rather than the heavy clay. Heavy soils or very dry soils, clematis want a little bit of help get really established. So here, having got this plant, it's in a polythene pot, and I'm very carefully going to slit this here and open it up. And what we want to do is to help these young roots establish well in the ground. As you can see, they're nice. They're young here, nice and fresh. These young tips are super. So I like to plant clematis really about another 2 inches or so deeper than the soil surface. So they've got some possibility of building up some buds under there.
But I thought that clematis were lime lovers.
I think that's a little bit of old thinking, Jeff, because the old Viticella old man's beard was used usually as the understock for the clematis growers many years ago, or years and years ago, but now, of course, most clematis are grown on their own roots, so they're good and strong. So I don't think that really isn't necessary at all. What we want, or what they want, is watering well in the early days and feeding well and getting them established like that. They're hungry feeders, not excess pH one way or the other, and then they're quite happy.
So they're really quite soil tolerant, and that's good to know. Now, you've left the cane in there.
Yes, I think it's an idea to help the plant get established, and if we get a lot of wind whizzing round, it will help the plant establish better. And then next November, when we trim the plant down to 6-9 inches or so, we'll take the cane out. Then next spring, of course, the new growth then can be trained in here through the heathers, over those golden ones, and kept away here from the Picea. We don't want to spoil that lovely form there.
A lot of people have houses completely surrounded by concrete. So do clematis really do well in tubs?
Yes, they can. You must choose the right tub and various things like that. It's very important to choose the correct type of tub. This is a good sized one, 2 feet or so in diameter, 18 inches in deep. It's wood. It's very important to choose wood or stone, not plastic, because plastic containers become far too hot in the summer. That's really bad news. And the compost, you need a good free draining compost like this. That's very important for the winter period, so the compost can drain away and the root system's not too wet. And then the variety is vital too. We must choose really a good free flowering variety, compact habit, that's vital. And this is an ideal one. This is called Pink Champagne, a variety that I introduced from Japan some time ago. And this is going to be available in garden centre this year. So compact habit is absolutely vital.
Well, you want to make a freestanding feature here rather than going against the wall, using some canes. I'm intrigued by this idea.
Well, it's a simple idea and it's most effective. We have a good, very compact habit of this clematis, and that's vital. And we can just put this framework in just like this, and really it's just a matter of tying it quite easily at the top here, so that we get a very simple but a very effective framework.
It's rather nice, isn't it? Would you say that this is a good time of the year for planting?
A very good time for planting clematis, as long as they're kept well watered now during August and September. The clematis planted at this time of the year will establish themselves very nicely, and that will help a lot, especially next year. One wouldn't need to do quite so much watering, and as people who planted this spring will have noticed they've had to do a lot of watering to keep the clematis alive.
You've brought along some other varieties down there which look rather nice. What are they?
Yes, one can choose quite a selection of varieties for this type of work. The Alpina macropetala types, this is macropetala, but they come in a range of different colours, or this large flowered one, which is Daniel Doronda. Daniel Doronda has a semi-double flower in the spring during late May and June, and then single flowers later in the summer. So one can choose a real range of varieties, but you need compact ones of compact habit.
I want to plant something else in the bottom of the tub as well, so I've chosen these sedums, which I think are going to look quite nice with that.
I think that's most effective. It'll help to give a cool root run for the clematis, and will give added interest, and will allow for the foliage of the sedums to just flow over the edge of the container, breaking it, making it look rather effective.
Few groups of flowering plants have such a long season as clematis. Here on the west-facing wall of Brook Cottage, Perle d'Azur is at its peak. And as you can see, there's nothing quite like these large flowered forms for giving the garden a bit of oomph. They come in a range of colours, and between them can provide a spectacle from May until the autumn. Joining them are a host of smaller flowered varieties. Individually the blooms may not be as dramatic, but they're full of personality. This is Minuet with a white stripe through the magenta. And like most of them, it appears in a great cloudburst. Alba luxurians looks as if it's been dipped in green ink. And this is one of my favourites, a climber with one of the longest names of any garden plant, Clematis Viticella purpurea plana elegans, with double rosettes the colour of faded velvet curtains. The obvious place to put clematis is up walls, and here they're grown both in sun and shade. There are other ways of growing them. They're effective out in the open border, grown up wire-covered posts and frames to provide a vertical accent or a plume of late colour. This is Victoria in partnership with the smaller flowered Étoile Violette. And here they're actually also serving a double purpose, blotting out a manhole cover. Of course, Clematis are most at home growing into a living support. Here, Madame Julia Correvon is scrambling into an upright cherry, having been planted a few feet away. But often it's neater and easier to plant the Clematis up against a wall or fence and simply train its flowering stems into the host shrub or tree. Clematis viticella is giving a second flowering season to the Moroccan broom. And Buddleia Nanho Blue is partnered by the mauve Margaret Hunt. All Clematis want a good support system to twine through, and against a wall, one of the best methods is a widely spaced mesh with vertical as well as horizontal wires. The stems can then be trained out into a fan shape. There's a lot of confusion over the pruning of Clematis, but all these late-blooming, large and small-flowered varieties at Brook Cottage are treated in the same way, cut back to a low framework of stems in late February or March. This keeps the plants fairly well clothed, almost to the ground, and the flower power is boosted by a good dollop of manure in spring, and occasionally a high potash feed a little later. A cool, moist root run is the other key to success. If there isn't natural shade, a piece of broken pot or pipe around the roots will help to create it. Afterwards, it's a matter of watering frequently during dry spells. Here it's done once a week. Really, it's very hard to think of another group of plants that can rival Clematis for sheer flower impact so late in the year. And here in August, there are varieties like Étoile Rose still only poised to launch themselves over the border.